In this video, I want to talk about my experience with anxiety and what I learned from having anxiety for my whole life and how I figured out how to not let it get in the way of my life. So, I first realized that anxiety was a big problem for me when I was in high school because I'd always been told growing up that I was, really gifted, really talented, whatever it might be. But my performance in all of these things that I was supposed to be good at would always be really inconsistent. I would do bad on a test even though I knew everything that I needed to know. It was just pure nerves, just pure anxiety. And obviously, the same thing played out when it came to meeting people, when it came to making friends. I didn't meet as many people as I should have in high school because I felt that way. And, the one that bothered me personally the most was probably sports because I played soccer very seriously for my whole time growing up. And I was really good at it, but, you know, I was always held back by my nerves. I would do really well in practice. I would do really well when I was just messing around having fun. But when it came to the time when, everything was on the line and everyone was watching, my performance, even if it was good, would be, drastically impaired compared to what it could be. And so I kind of suffered with that throughout high school, and through very gradual exposure therapy, I guess, I eventually, started to improve my performance. But I still definitely wasn't content. I was, you know, forcing my performance to increase rather than relaxing myself to the point that it would happen naturally, if that makes any sense. So, so I, went to college after high school, and, that was a big inflection point where I knew that I was going to have to, or I really wanted to change it. I wanted to, be a different person when I went to college, right? And, this was around the time, I guess a little bit before that, was when I first tried alcohol. And the first time that I tried it, my entire perspective on the world shifted because it was like all the things that had been holding me back just got instantly switched off. And I was a new person that I'd never been before. I'd never experienced low inhibition in my life. So, when I first started drinking, I kind of made a fool out of myself because I had never learned how to function as a low inhibition person. And, that experience just made me realize that it was possible to be different. Obviously, drinking is not the best way to achieve that, but it just made me realize that, this stuff wasn't just, a lack of willpower or just a psychological issue. It made me realize that there were physical, things that could be altered in my brain that would make this go away. And that's what sent me down a rabbit hole of learning about biology and learning about health. But anyway, that's kind of besides the point. So if I take it back a little bit further to when I was a kid, everyone when they're a kid, they generally have less anxiety because they haven't been taught to care what anyone thinks. They haven't been burdened with very many expectations yet, so they're just, having fun. And, I remember when I was a kid, this is kind of embarrassing, but I would cry before every soccer game because I was so, scared of performing, scared of being judged. I don't even know what it was really. I was just scared. And my parents would kind of have to force me to go and play. And then once I started playing, once, I started having fun, the anxiety would be gone. And I think that is the critical difference. Even if you are a highly strung person, you don't necessarily have to be feeling super anxious all the time. Being highly strung or whatever, that's a sign that you actually have a powerful nervous system, maybe. You just haven't really harnessed the power of it yet. You can't control your own power, in a sense. And, I fought to try and control my own nervous system, but I think that a way more effective way to go about it is to have fun. If you're not having any fun, then of course you're going to be stressed in the big picture. And I think that now that I'm older, I think that rather than viewing it as playing and having fun like a kid, nowadays, or now at my age, the way to have fun is to be authentic. You're never going to feel any spark of joy unless you say what you truly want to say, unless you're doing things because you want to do them, not because you want to look a certain way or you want to impress a certain person. Those things are going to make you anxious if you hold them in your mind. You should be focused on what is to be gained. You should focus on, how you can enjoy your life. And I've noticed that guys my age right now, they tend to, when they socialize, they tend to drink, watch sports, and gamble. Those are the main three things that I see guys my age doing. I mean, maybe I just know the wrong people, but that is what I've seen. And all of those things, they can give you that sense of fun artificially. Of course you get dopamine hits if you put something on the line, or you get invested in someone else's life on TV. Like, sure, that gives you dopamine hits and simulates that fun, but it's just going to leave you feeling really hollow afterwards. And I think that all of these guys are just really suppressing whatever it is that they really want to say, whatever it is that they really want to do, in favor of being accepted, in favor of, being integrated with society. Another experience that I had that was kind of similar, I would say, when I was probably 17 or 18, I became really ambitious. I was watching, self-improvement content online, and I started to understand what was really possible, and I just became really ambitious. I became really mesmerized by what I saw other people online achieving. And, I was vocal about my interests at the time. I would talk about it to my friends, to my family, to whoever. And, my interest was met with a lot of criticism, was met with a lot of, people almost looking down on me for thinking that something greater was even possible. And looking back, I think that version of myself was actually not that anxious, was actually pretty confident, because I was being authentic. I was expressing myself. And in the years that followed that, I became more and more fake. I started building a persona that would, make my life smoother, that would make people like me more. And that made my anxiety come back. Drinking to calm your nerves only makes them worse at baseline. And so I had to, over the course of probably the last year, I had to almost rediscover myself. I had to remember what it is that I really cared about, because I had allowed my mind to be completely, wrapped up in other people's realities, really. I was, maintaining relationships or images with other people just out of fear of being judged, just out of not wanting to deal with a hard conversation. Like, you deserve to be able to explore your interests. You deserve to be able to talk to people about what you really want to talk about. You deserve to be able to be unfiltered, you know? And that's really difficult nowadays when, saying what everyone is thinking but no one wants to say just gets you a lot of hate and just makes people really uncomfortable, just offends people. So, to help you kind of get back to your authentic self, to get back to the version of yourself that can have fun, there's a few questions that I want you to just ask yourself, or things that I want you to hold in your mind or think about whenever you get into this stressed out mentality, worrying about other people. So, first thing is, when you think that you have to do something to meet expectations, ask yourself, do I really have to do this? What's going to be the consequence if I don't meet this responsibility that someone else wants from me, but I don't want for myself? What's the consequence? I think the consequence of you just suppressing yourself and just inching yourself further away from your path is probably a way worse consequence in the long run than creating some short-term friction, than, upsetting some authority figures, or, being made fun of by your friends. Who cares? I guess what I'm trying to say is, you need to hold the bigger picture in your mind. You need to remember that we're all just in a process of figuring out ourselves, in a process of figuring out what we're supposed to do. And most people in Gen Z are really far from that, because we've been handed such a heavy amount of distractions, and, because of our health issues too, we don't have a lot of the literal hormones and neurotransmitters that would facilitate us being less stressed and able to actually do what it is that we desire. So I think that what more people need to do is they need to follow their urges, in a sense. You need to think about what will be fun to you. Think about where your excitement would be, because that's your body telling you exactly what it wants you to do. What would make you have fun today? Are you doing only things that are not fun today? And it doesn't count if you're artificially creating this fun. Like I mentioned, if you're just getting lost by watching someone else's life, or doing drugs, or there are definitely unhealthy ways to chase fun, but most likely, there's something out there that learning more about it or working to get better at it is going to be fun to you. There's something out there. Maybe it's not socially acceptable. Maybe you think it's a waste of time, but there is something out there like that, most likely. So, what else are you here to do? What else is life about if it's not about doing that? So, the other question that I want you to consider is, if no one could see you, if you were completely invisible, what would you do? Because that will show you what it is that you truly want to do. Way too many of our desires are just wrapped up in the bigger picture of what other people think. We want to be successful so that we can buy this or that and look a certain way so that we can get that certain girl or whatever. You don't impress anyone by trying to impress them. You impress them by being yourself. So that's counterproductive anyways. So I would say the bigger conclusion here is really just, if being yourself causes everyone to, talk down to you and be rude to you, then you are just completely out of alignment. You're just around the completely wrong people, and it may take a while for you to, reorient your life in a way that, you know, you can have healthy connections. But maintaining harmony just for the sake of maintaining harmony is not a healthy connection. If you have to wear a mask, if you have to suppress yourself, then that relationship is very unhealthy. And this is what most people are doing nowadays. So I guess don't be afraid of being alone. Don't be afraid of standing alone. Don't be afraid of thinking something that no one else will agree with.